Right, a charming voice, recording in progress. Okay, this is the Promise Award interview with Julie Newman of Boeing. And here we go.
Oh, is that my cue?
Nope, it's
Oh, okay.
my cue to start.
I was like, I don't think that's what you said. Okay. I'll let you redo it then.
Thank you. Welcome to Making Leaders, a series of conversations with people who are leaders of this fast-changing industry, as well as those likely to step into leadership in the future. My name is Robert Bell, Executive Director of SSPI. The Making Leaders campaign helps space and satellite companies realize their potential for attracting and retaining the talented people who are utterly critical to the industry's future. And speaking of talent, I do have to ask, are you space business qualified? Well, you are if you've registered for SBQ. That's a series of self-paced online training courses in the fundamentals of the space business, from launch and spacecraft to communications and markets. They're produced by SSPI in partnership with GSOA and the online training company SatProf. And you can learn more about SBQ at spacebq.org. That's spacebakerquebec.org. Today's conversation continues a series about the power of talent to drive our industry success and the people and the organizations making that talent mission happen. It will drop on the first Monday of every month as part of SSPI's podcast program. Our Making Leaders series is also made possible by the support of SSPI's corporate partners, including Access Intelligence, Hughes, and K&L Gates, and by the nearly 3,000 individual members of SSPI around the world. If you're one of them, I want to thank you. I also want to thank the space practice at Deloitte, the global consulting firm, and Momentous Space, developer of in-space servicing, for underwriting this year's award selection. Now, in October of 2023, SSPI introduced its 20 under 35 employees and entrepreneurs of the year, selected from nominations from our global membership by an independent panel of judges. Now, all 21 are remarkable examples of early career development and achievement, as you can see for yourself at 20under35.com. But our evaluation system does assign a score to each one. And members of the Space and Satellite Hall of Fame reviewed the top scoring 20 under 35 and selected 3 of them to receive a Promise Award. Now, we expect great things of all our 20 under 35, but the Promise Award signals the judgment of the industry's Hall of Fame that these 3 people have futures ahead of them of the greatest promise. And we're speaking today with one of them, Julie Newman, who is a program chief engineer at Boeing. Now, it's not in her job description, I believe, but she actually specializes in something which is solving late-stage problems that could set back a space system by months or even years. In her current job, that means leading a team of engineers and program managers who are identifying the risks of a decision to swap out a payload of a major geocommunications satellite, and then analyze them and resolve them. Now, fortunately, she has plenty of practice at this because in a previous position, she led a team developing the engine controller assembly for the first stage of the Space Launch System. And while testing the engineering model, they found what's called a sneak path, an electric current running where it is definitely not supposed to be. So, fairly late in the process, she led the team in a successful redesign that resolved that problem. And before that, working for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, she was responsible for a radar instrument aboard the Europa Clipper mission. Now, late in the project, once again, a radiation test for the component suddenly threw up errors that threatened to derail the entire program. She came up with an innovative way to remove the problem circuit without compromising the mission, and that's going to allow the Clipper to make its launch date next year. And when she's not heading off potential disaster, excuse me, I got to start that paragraph again. When she's not heading off potential disaster, she contributes to safety and quality assurance programs across Boeing's El Segundo site. And she's also the best-selling author of Pull, Don't Push, Why STEM Messaging to Girls Isn't Working and What to Do Instead. It's based on a decade of volunteering in STEM outreach in partnership with institutions across California. And all that is why she received a 2023 Promise Award. So, Julie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Robert. It's lovely to be here, and I'm so honored to be receiving this award from SSPI. It really is a dream, and I had such a fabulous time meeting all of the 20 under 35 and the members of the organization back in October.
Super. So tell us more. I gave a little short form there, but tell us more about the work you do and why it matters to your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, my current role is as a chief engineer on one of our major geostationary communication satellite programs. This is for a customer in Indonesia. It will fly over the Indonesian islands and provide communications, including space-based internet direct to customers. And this is a really perfect application location for this type of connectivity because Indonesia is made up of so many little islands, and it's just completely infeasible to lay fiber to all of them. And particularly with some of them, they are quite rural. And within the same coverage area too, you have incredibly dense cities of Jakarta and other large cities in there. So it really is a perfect application and a really fun program to work on. It's great working with our international customers, and I'm happy to be working with them. I've previously worked with a team in France for a different program, and so now I think I've completed my global circle at least a little bit more. I think I'll fill it in over the years, but it's nice getting that whole global view on the industry.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the count of the islands in Indonesia is supposed to be about 70,000. Now,
Yeah, I think it depends on what you define as an island, but it's definitely thousands and tens of thousands, I think, in there.
so what led you into this industry as opposed to another tech sector?
Yeah, so I can kind of take that question in two ways. So the first one is, I think, what led me to engineering in general. And what I love attributing to that is it was really in high school, middle school, and high school growing up. I participated in Science Olympiad, which is a nationwide science and engineering competition. And through that, I built a whole ton of really cool contraptions. So model rockets, model airplanes, some robots, few different Rube Goldberg devices, little cars, sort of any little, kid age project you can think of. I did through Science Olympiad, and that really exposed me to something outside the classroom where I had full ownership over the success of the thing, and I was able to, put in that extra effort and see the results that come out of it. You can only study so hard for a math test. Um, but I could spend my whole summer building robots, and it was great. And that, Science Olympiad is an organization that's really dear to my heart still. I've been volunteering with them ever since I left high school. Currently a national supervisor for one of the events, and I help write the rules for the years. We just had our national competition in May. We were in, I'm blanking on we were in Wichita this year, which is a really great place, particularly for the flight events of the season. And then taking it from the other direction, how did I end up in space? And it was interesting. I think a lot of people sort of know forever that they're going to go into space. And what's funny for me is I kind of started there and then didn't really think about it and then found that I could work in it. So it's a story I don't tell too often, but actually growing up, I have two older brothers and they're also in technology and engineering space. And one of my brothers had a poster on the back of his door that was all of the planets with all of their moons, and it was all about space stuff. And I just remember sitting on the carpet in his room, just kind of looking at this poster when I was really little. And I had all of the names of the planets and all of the moons and even the little ones memorized. And so I just loved space things growing up. I loved astronomy. My parents would take us to science museums and things. And then when I was going into college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I figured I liked engineering based on Science Olympiad sort of things, and then through college had a few different experiences where I thought I would go a different way, and learned that I didn't like those. So first, I thought I would go in the more semiconductors applied physics direction, and I spent a summer research program with a lot of time in a clean room and running an SEM microscope, and realized I hated it. Didn't want to be a chemist. Then after that, I found my next summer. I was thinking, okay, well, I think I'm really liking electrical engineering and I'm liking hardware design sort of things. but maybe I'll take it in the medical application direction. So I did another research project that was for developing a retinal prosthesis for patients to restore vision from age-related macular degeneration or other diabetic retinopathy style conditions, basically a little implantable that would then go to electrodes in your brain and give you a coarse resolution of sight. And that was demonstrated with patients. This was while I was at Caltech, and then in collaboration with, I believe, a professor at USC. And through doing that project, I realized, wow, I don't really like this stuff. I know that this wouldn't help a person for at least, 10, 20 years minimum if we ever get there. And I found that kind of discouraging. And it also led me to realize I didn't really like research. And then the following summer, I instead said, okay, I'm done with academia at this point. I'm going to try out an internship. And so through some connections, I did an internship at SpaceX. And that was a phenomenal experience. Within, a couple of weeks, I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. I'm not going and doing a PhD. I'm definitely straight industry. And I want to build, rockets and satellites and things that go into space for the rest of my career. And then after graduation, then moved on to JPL and had a phenomenal time there working on some really cool missions. An Earth satellite, the Europa Clipper mission. And then for the last few years, I've been now at Boeing working again on a big rocket and some big satellites and some littler satellites, but incredibly powerful ones. And it's just, I'm so happy that I refound space and that space industry found me.
Well, one thing I can tell you is that once people get involved in this industry, they almost never leave for just
They
the reason
don't.
excited. Okay, so when you join a business like JPL or Boeing, of course you bring skills to it. That's why you're being hired, but you also, need to develop over time a working knowledge of the industry that it's in. Why is it doing what it's doing, and how does it relate to all the other companies and organizations involved? So looking back, what do you think was some of the most important working knowledge that you gained that helped you succeed in these roles?
Yeah, I think, you learn a lot in college and with a degree, for sure. But I think the first year in the industry, you learn more than you did in the 4 years of college. And, I think probably most people's experiences, you join a place, and for me, that was joining JPL, and you think, oh, this is all super specific to this company, and this is how things are done here, and maybe if I work somewhere else, it'd be different. And interestingly enough, though, when I did make the jump, learned that, oh no, actually that's the industry. That is not a space, a unique location based sort of thing. But I think as far as sort of the skills, certainly I learned lots of technical things and lots of program management things along the way in those early years. But taking a more active role outside of just doing the things and learning on the job, I definitely learned a lot from mentors over my time, really seeking out mentors, and in particular mentors not necessarily just from the technical perspective. I certainly did have those. I had a phenomenal mentor who I was sort of attached to at the hip with when I first started, and he had worked on Cassini and he'd been there for 20 or 30 years and knew everything and would just pull me over to the whiteboard and explain any question I possibly had. But in addition to that, really seeking out mentors, really for more of the, how's this all working, and some of the sort of soft skill style things, in all honesty, more of the leadership, more of the communications, more of the dealing with, imperfect people in an organization. And that's something that, certainly being in the industry for a while, you kind of learn the tricks of the trade. And sometimes you learn it in a way that's even hard to explain. And so that's where having sort of someone you can actually ask, like, okay, I'm in this situation and this is what I'm perceiving, and having that mentor to say, okay, but did you think about, this potential motivation from that person, or the fact that this person reports to this other person who's asking for something else. And so learning all of that sort of stuff has really helped me progress in my career for sure. And to go along with that as well, supplementing that with a lot of books. There's a million and one leadership books out there and a million and one negotiation books out there, and finding a few that are the diamonds in the rough, perhaps, have been really pivotal in my career progression, for sure.
Interesting. I first noticed that what you're talking about when I realized that I could get a couple of clues from a conversation with somebody and connect it to 10 other things that I have been told and go, oh, that's what's going on in that industry or that whatever it was. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
really interesting. So what is the biggest lesson you think you learned, whether positive or negative, and how did you learn it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest lessons, and what I like to help certainly younger engineers understand, is at the end of the day, we're all just people in an organization. And understanding that and realizing, yes, there's a corporate hierarchy, but it's all still just people. And no one's on a real pedestal. Everyone is approachable at the end of the day. And that, even your upper level manager is still a person with things outside of work and with motivations and people who bother them, or people who they have been at the company with for 20 years and they're best friends and they'll talk everything over lunch, sort of things. I've seen that through a few different roles, but in particular in the role where I've been a chief of staff to one of our executives, a chief engineer for all commercial satellite programs at Boeing. That's really given me a broad, high-level perspective of how the organization works. And, it's certainly been a learning experience that sometimes it looks different from that position than it does, say, as an engineer on the ground, if you will. But also that it's still people, and certainly people that are better at making it look like it's all kept together from the outside and making sure that things go right. But behind the scenes, there is still the churn and the turbulence that you don't necessarily see back there. And I think learning to navigate that and to make everything continue to go right has been one of the best lessons I've learned so far.
Right. Everything's really always just on the verge of chaos, and it's just a question of how you manage that.
Exactly. And it's funny when the way you've put it too, where problems seem to find me. I hadn't ever really actually framed it like that before, and it's totally true. I'm for better or worse, I really thrive under the pressure of a really weird and challenging problem, and then making sure that it has to go right. It's the failure's not an option style problem, and so far so good. We've been fixing them.
I need to introduce you to Tori Bruno. You guys have a very similar outlook on the world. Space and satellite is growing in an unprecedented number of directions. What part of the business or parts of the business are you finding most interesting right now?
Right now, I think a way that we're going is certainly in the more adaptive satellite direction. And that's something that we're really excelling at Boeing with our software-defined satellites. It's the paradigm that, for the most part, we tend to, up to this point, you define everything you plan to do with the satellite on the ground. And you pretty much never change that unless something breaks, and then you do have some graceful degradation. But you really don't completely paradigm switch or completely change your service area significantly. And that's something that is becoming possible. And so I think we are moving towards a world of more software-defined satellites, more launch something really high power and have it for a long time doing things. And those things might be in different orbits. Those things might be in different coverage areas. And I think going along with that, we certainly, as an industry, have a conversation around a lot of AI and more, adaptive style algorithms. And that's definitely something that I think we will see an explosion of in the next few years of, really more on the fly style management of your satellite to make it more efficient and in any, as artificial intelligence does, it's making it better, but it doesn't really know how to tell you how it's doing it necessarily. It just is. And that's going to be something that will be a unique and new challenge for us to handle, as far as, you know, us and the computer might not understand what's going on, but we know it's working. And sometimes that means you'll have to let it run for a little bit longer, and maybe there will be more drops in coverage for a brief period at startup, but then it'll start running smoothly. And I think that sort of thing is going to be really interesting to see. And then combining that too with, you think of it as one satellite, but then making it a constellation, all doing that. And it really starts to get very interesting and very complicated very quickly. We'll see when I get pulled into one of those challenges.
Reminds me of visiting a satellite plant decades ago at this point, and I was shown a reflector, and I looked at the reflector and I said, that looks like a reverse map of sort of the Atlantic and Europe and so forth. And the person said, very good, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I stared at him, and I stared at the thing and thought, let me get this straight. You're going to put this $200 or $300 million thing in space, and you've already decided the business plan for the next 20 years? Are you crazy?
Yeah. And it's the Moore's law acceleration of technology change, and that's not going to work anymore. That certainly worked great at the time, and I do love those reflectors. I think they're very, very cool, and the manufacturing of them is really astonishing. But now moving more, as we have on the O3B satellites that Boeing has built and designed, having that phased array technology with hundreds of beams that can direct things anywhere you want to go, and even task switch. You can effectively PWM, so to speak, between two locations if they have low rates needed on them, and that's really interesting.
You could go back in time and give yourself some career advice right there at the beginning, when I guess you were maybe at JPL or making the leap to Boeing. What would you say?
I would say nothing. I mostly be from seeing enough sci-fi to know that you don't mess with time travel, and I feel like I've made it into one of the 2 Sigma life paths for myself, so I really don't want to mess that up. I'm having a great time. But to your other question of, for someone in a similar situation where I'm not going to break the fabric of space and time, what would my advice be to them? And to that, I think it's really just to keep learning and to keep staying open, right? The industry is changing all the time, and it's hard to keep up with, say, the pace of the technology and knowing everything about the technology. But as you learn it, you learn the underlying nature of much of those changes. And ultimately, a lot of the real fundamentals don't change a ton. They're just sort of tweaked and re-understood within the new context. So learning along those lines, and like I said before, the work also focusing too on the soft skills and things. That's something that you really don't tend to touch in, say, a college degree, but is perhaps something that more institutions should take a more active role in teaching.
The cliche I've heard is that we hire on hard skills and fire on soft skills.
And promote on soft skills often. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A great engineer with good soft skills will always be promoted over an exceptional engineer without them. And that's something I like to tell students, that well-roundedness is really important. Ultimately, they're hiring, and you're going to sit next to them for 40 hours a week, and so they gotta like you.
As you said, we're all people.
Yep.
Is there anything happening in the space and satellite business, broadly speaking, not just you're part of it, that you think is going to be particularly important to the future of us all here on planet Earth?
Something that I love about the space industry is that ultimately it's very inspiring to a lot of people, even the ones that they're never going to touch it, they're never going to work in the industry. It's something that pretty much everyone likes to talk about, right? It's going back to the moon landings, and everyone talks about that. And now something that I continue to find surprising is how we have so much happening in space that it's become ubiquitous. And people don't necessarily notice when there's a new launch or something. And there's so many launches and so many satellites and so many things happening in space that it's really only the occasional one that sort of gets into the discrete memory of the general public. And to that end, I think for those of us in the industry, it gives us a phenomenal opportunity to do that STEM outreach, right? Because kids love hearing about space. There's tons and tons of even the little, with my kids, we have a whole pile of space themed, cardboard board books because they're toddlers and they can't talk or read. And it's one of those things that everyone likes. And so to that end, it makes us very effective when we go into a sort of K through 12 student environment. And we can talk about these fun things. And yes, you're talking about, oh, look at this exciting rocket, look at this exciting satellite. But underneath it all, you're telling them that they can do it too. And that they can do hard things. And that you're a real person, you're not on a pedestal. And that there's so many good reasons for them to focus on their studies and to focus on extracurriculars that get them excited, so that they too can go out and see themselves as someone who would one day be excited to tell a room of high schoolers that they're doing a cool career, even if that's not engineering, even if that's not space. So I think that's something that really it brings me a lot of hope that our industry can make even more of a difference, because we really do help set the tone for a lot of the future of technology, because we have such a stronger voice than, say, certainly someone working in, I don't know, I'll pick a random one, like a fintech or something, or excellent, cool stuff in municipal and like civil engineering things. That stuff's super interesting, but it doesn't always resonate as well. When you can say, here's this cool thing in space, it resonates super well, and it gives you that avenue to really make a difference with kids.
That is amazing. As you know, SSPI is deeply committed to all that. We actually recently organized our Better Satellite World content and created teachers' guide materials, because we want to start going out to the science community and say, hey, here's science teaching community, and say,
absolutely. And teachers eat that up. I was recently speaking at the National Science Teachers Association conference about a lot of these things and about my book. And, teachers love getting that, and it really helps them in the classroom. And a lot of times too, one of the things I talk about a lot in my book is they have a hard time explaining it because they didn't choose that path, And so something that's really valuable is just to get someone in the industry into their classroom, rather than them having to, as a teacher, explain what life as an engineer is like. They can just say, I'm so glad, students, you asked about engineering. Here I have one, and he or she is going to talk to you about why it's a cool place to be.
Well, unfortunately, that has to be it for now, which is a shame, because obviously I could keep chatting with you for quite some time. Julie, it's been fun. It's been inspiring, as it always is for me, to talk to people like yourself. So congratulations on being one of our 20 under 35, and most especially on being a Promise Award winner.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Like any tech industry, the space and satellite business is driven by the ambition, the knowledge, and the leadership skills of its people. In our Making Leaders series, we take time away from business plans and technology roadmaps to focus on the people making a difference. We thank SSPI's individual members and corporate partners Access Intelligence, Hughes, and K&L Gates for supporting the Making Leaders series, and Deloitte and Momentous Space for underwriting our selection of the Promise Award winners. You can follow us on Twitter at SSPI. I still say Twitter because that X thing just isn't working for me. On Facebook or LinkedIn, just search for Space and Satellite Professionals. And if you're not a member, I encourage you to become one by going to sSPI.org/join. That's JOIN. For SSPI and Making Leaders, this is Robert Bell. And we're out. And my phone dinged at precisely that moment. Okay.
Oh.
See here, let me
I
find.
couldn't hear it, so I don't think it got recorded.
That's good. I'm very pleased by that because I don't want it recording.